Peace be upon you all. Today, we begin the journey through the greatest story ever told. The story of the man who transformed the world forever. The man who brought humanity from darkness into light. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Together, we will travel back to the ancient land of Makkah. The man whose message is believed today by more than 2 billion Muslims.
In the same year that history changed, in a land of barren deserts and vast horizons, there stood a sacred house unlike any other, the Holy Kaaba, a sanctuary built by the Prophet Abraham and his son Ishmael, peace be upon them, generations ago. People flocked to it from all corners of the Arabian Peninsula, celebrating its ancient heritage. But in the far south, a powerful ruler named Abraha had a different vision. He built a magnificent sanctuary in Yemen, aspiring to win the hearts of the people. But the eyes of the Arabian Peninsula remained fixed on the sacred house. Pride turned to anger, and anger turned to ambition. Abraham made a decision that shook the entire desert. He assembled a massive army, the likes of which the Arabian Peninsula had never seen before. Thousands of soldiers marched under a scorching sky. Spears flashed under the blazing sun. Dust rose to the horizon like a raging storm. At the head of the army stood a colossal elephant, a creature few Arabs had ever seen. Its footsteps echoed across the land. Its presence filled hearts with terror. Their destination, Mecca, their goal, to destroy the Kaaba. As the news spread through the valleys, fear gripped the people of Mecca. Families fled towards the mountains. Children clung to their mothers. Silence descended upon the city. Yet, one man stood among them, his heart unwavering. Abdul Muttalib, the noble leader of the Quraysh. Calmly and confidently he reassured his people, saying, "This army has not come for your sake, but for the sake of the house itself, and God will not abandon his house." Then Abdul Muttalib marched towards Abraha's camp. He passed by the soldiers. He passed by the weapons. He passed by the enormous elephant, standing like a mountain of flesh. He entered the governor's tent. Abraha looked at him with admiration and respect. But when Abdul Muttalib only asked for the return of his captive camels, amazement turned to anger. Abraha said, "I treated you with respect when I first saw you. I thought you had come to ask me to spare your sacred house, and yet you ask only for the camels." Then Abdul Muttalib stood with unwavering pride and confidence. He replied with words that history will never forget.
"I am the Lord of the camels. As for the house, it has a Lord who will protect it."
The next morning, the army advanced. The enormous elephant refused to move toward the sacred house. Chaos erupted among the soldiers. Then suddenly, the sky began to change, the horizon filled with dark shapes, and it grew thicker, until the sky itself seemed shrouded in clouds. Countless swarms hovered above the army, and stones rained down upon them from the sky. Chaos reigned in their ranks. Panic seized their mighty forces, and in moments, the invincible army crumbled under the weight of a fate no one could have foreseen. And in that same year, in a humble house in Mecca, a child was born. A child whose message would one day reach every corner of the earth. Muhammad, peace be upon him. The man whose light would illuminate the paths of nations, and whose message would be the final divine message to humanity. After the year of the elephant, the child who would change history was born in Makkah, Muhammad. But before he was born, his father Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib had already passed away. The child entered this world an orphan, under the care of his mother, Amina bint Wahb. As was the custom among the noble families of Arabia, the infant Muhammad was taken into the desert to live among the tribe of Banu Sa'd. There, a woman named Halima al-Sa'diyah carried the blessed child into her home. At first, she hesitated to take him. He was an orphan, and no great wealth was expected from his family. But from the very moment Muhammad entered her life, everything began to change. Her weak donkey became swift, Her exhausted camel overflowed with milk, her home filled with unexpected blessings, and the dry lands around them seemed touched by mercy. Halima and her husband watched in amazement. As blessings surrounded the child wherever he went, years passed, and Muhammad grew in purity, wisdom, and noble character. But sorrow would return once again. At the age of 6, he lost his beloved mother, Amina. On the lonely journey back from Yathrib, the young child buried his mother beneath the desert sky. Once again, Muhammad faced the pain of orphanhood after her death. His grandfather Abdul Muttalib cared for him with deep love and honor, but only a few years later, death came once more, and the child was entrusted to his uncle, Abu Talib. Though Abu Talib was not wealthy, he loved Muhammad like his own son. The boy grew into a young man known across Makkah for honesty, dignity, and truthfulness. The people called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. As he matured, Muhammad began traveling with trade caravans across Arabia and Ash-Sham. Under the burning desert sun, he learned the ways of merchants, tribes, and distant lands, but unlike many traders of his time, he never deceived, never betrayed, never lied. His honesty became known throughout Makkah, until news of the young merchant reached one of the noblest women of Quraysh, Khadija bint Khuwaylid, a wealthy and respected businesswoman. Impressed by his truthfulness and noble character, she entrusted him with her trade caravans, and when he returned with honesty, wisdom, and success, Khadija saw in Muhammad something rare among men. Soon after, she proposed marriage to him, and in a world filled with corruption and idols, Allah prepared for his final prophet a home filled with peace, loyalty, and love. The marriage of Muhammad and Khadija would become one of the greatest bonds in history. Before revelation descended from the heavens, and before the world would change forever. Following his marriage to Khadija, Muhammad entered a season of peace, stability, and blessing. Within a home filled with love, trust, and security, he found comfort alongside a devoted wife who stood by his side through every chapter of life. Together, they were blessed with children, and the hardships of his early years gradually gave way to a life of dignity and contentment. His success in trade continued to flourish. Known for his honesty, integrity, and fairness, he earned the confidence of the people of Makkah and the admiration of Quraysh. So exemplary was his character that he became known throughout the city by a title that would define him forever, Al-Amin, the trustworthy. Yet these blessings were more than signs of worldly success. The secure home, the loyal companion, the respected reputation, and the trust of an entire community were all preparing him for a burden unlike any other, a burden that no ordinary man could carry alone. While many around him were consumed by wealth, status, and tribal rivalries, Muhammad remained untouched by the moral decay of his age. God had preserved his pure nature from idolatry, intoxication, and the vices that surrounded him. As the years passed, Muhammad, peace be upon him, began withdrawing from the noise of Makkah. The corruption surrounding the Kaaba troubled his heart. The injustice, the worship of idols, the burial of innocent daughters beneath the sand, the oppression of the weak, and the endless arrogance of men. He would leave the city for days at a time, climbing the rocky mountains surrounding Makkah, seeking solitude far from the chaos of men. There, inside a small cave upon Mount Hira, Muhammad, peace be upon him, spent long nights in deep contemplation, watching the stars above the silent desert sky, thinking about creation, about truth, about the creator of the heavens and the earth. The world around him was changing. Empires continued to wage war. Nations were consumed by corruption and endless conflict, and humanity wandered deeper into darkness. But in the silence of that lonely cave, Allah was preparing his final messenger, preparing the man who would soon carry the greatest message ever revealed to mankind. And soon, the heavens would open, and history would never be the same again. The angel Gabriel brought down the first verses of the Holy Quran from heaven to earth.
خلق الإنسان الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم.
The angel Gabriel had just departed, and Muhammad was left standing alone. Moments earlier he had entered the Cave of Hira, seeking solitude and reflection. Now everything had changed. His heart raced, his body trembled, his mind struggled to comprehend what had just happened. What were these words? Who had spoken them? And why had he been chosen? What began in a small cave overlooking Mecca would soon change the course of human history. But before this message transformed the world, it first transformed the man chosen to carry it. Nothing in Muhammad's life had prepared him for this moment. He had come to Hira, seeking truth. Then came a command, simple, powerful, overwhelming.
What were these words? Who had spoken them? Why had he been chosen? Read.
Read. A single word. Yet it carried a weight unlike anything he had ever known. The encounter shook him to his very core. But what made these words so extraordinary? Why would they become the foundation of a faith followed by billions? Why would they endure for more than 14 centuries? To answer that question, we must understand the world into which they were revealed. Arabia stood between two great powers, the Byzantine Empire to the north, the Persian Empire to the east. Yet Arabia remained different, a land of deserts, tribes, trade routes, and oral tradition. The Arabs possessed no great libraries or universities, but they possessed something they valued deeply: language. Words were power, words were honor, words were identity. Poets were celebrated, orators were admired. The finest verses were memorized and passed from generation to generation. This was a society that understood language better than most. And it was into this world that Muhammad began reciting the Quran. The reaction was immediate. His listeners knew poetry, they knew prose, they knew eloquence. But what they heard was different. The rhythm was different, the structure was different, the power was different. Even many of his opponents could not deny it. These words were unlike anything they had heard before.
This recitation is unlike anything we have heard. Indeed, the structure, the power, it is baffling.
The Quran challenged them. If this is the speech of a man, produce something like it. A book, a chapter, even a single chapter. The challenge was clear, yet it remained unanswered. For Muslims, however, the miracle of the Quran goes far beyond language. Every book speaks from a human perspective. Kings speak as kings, philosophers as philosophers, poets as poets. But the Quran is different. For believers, it is not merely a book about God. It is God speaking to humanity. He commands, he warns, he promises, he challenges. He speaks of creation and destruction, of life and death, of the destiny of mankind. It does not sound like humanity searching for God. It sounds like God addressing humanity. Its influence extends beyond language alone. Across centuries, millions have memorized it, word for word, letter for letter. Children and adults, Arabs and non-Arabs alike, a phenomenon almost unmatched in human history. Yet none of this was visible to Muhammad that night. The civilizations that would rise, the nations that would embrace these words, the millions who would recite them every day, all of that still lay hidden in the future. At that moment, he was simply a man standing beneath the night sky of Arabia, his heart still trembling, his thoughts still racing, his life forever changed. He knew only one thing. Something extraordinary had happened, something that would soon change the world forever. But before the message transformed humanity, it would first transform the man chosen to carry it, and that story was only beginning.